We expelled the bodies through the double hatches, and were alone in the U-29. Our compasses, depth gauges, and other delicate instruments were ruined. Fortunately, we had storage batteries still capable of long use, both for interior lighting and for the searchlight. We were still drifting south, meanwhile sinking deeper and deeper. This is from The Temple by H.P. Lovecraft, a pretty average ancient horror story that you can read in about 15 minutes. So how do you turn it into a pretty great video game that you can play through in at least 15 hours? Well, you can start by dropping the World War I German U-boat theme and the discussion of how people from the wrong parts of Germany are swinehounds and of slender mental constitution.
You naughty, naughty boy, H.P.
And follow the example set by Stirring Abyss, a gorgeous turn-based tactical RPG mix created by the Finnish indie developer Sleepy Sentry and published by Slitherine, as you are transported back into the heat of the Cold War in 1958 to take the role of a member of a failing undersea expedition aboard USS Salem. Aboard may be a bit too strong a word because you wake up in a diving suit somewhere on the ocean floor. A few spear gun shots into grotesque and unnatural local fauna later, you pick up a survivor and finally end up in the conning tower of the submarine, only to find the vessel completely flooded, diving suit bays empty, and crew transponder readings splattered over the radar. No sight of captain or repair manuals. Oh, and the cook has been hiding in the cupboards all the time. Take a wild guess where your stash of Oreos went.
Oh no, Lieutenant Commander, sir. It was a googly-eyed elder monster from the team that took him.
Anyway, if you fail to have any clear guesses as to the pedigree of this game when it begins, you will be left with no doubt whatsoever as soon as you step onto the deck of USS Salem. This is XCOM. Armed dudes fighting alien monsters on a grid? Check. 2 action points for either moving or shooting? Check. Preset storyline missions and procedurally generated ones for a little bit of grinding? Check. Having a base and building it up by clearing up rooms first and then setting up the facilities you need between the missions? Check, check, check. There actually is an old underwater-themed XCOM game. Simply put, XCOM mechanics permeate everything, from managing your base to choosing only one of 2 skills offered at each of the 6 level-ups your troopers get. And that's good. Good? That's no way to end a tirade on originality. Well, I think adopting a familiar and robust tactical system that's sort of become an industry standard in your game is a reasonable decision if you expand on it and build it up, especially for a 3-dude indie developer like Sleepy Sentry, where anything groundbreakingly original would add 5 years to release date and inevitably yield something like 762 Hard Life, a game you deservedly don't know anything about, which will keep you awake at night. Not playing it for Christ's sakes. No, you'll keep thinking about how brilliant its combat system is. Anywho, here's our first conclusion. Don't go into Stirring Abyss expecting it to blow your mind with how novel its combat and overall structure are. They're not, but they're certainly enjoyable, and on higher difficulty levels will please the seasoned player. I had a blast figuring out the battle roles and interactions between the different classes of crew members, and making those hard choices about whether to direct the scarce resources you have into healing up your people, setting up a new room, or repairing the torpedo bay. Yes, I said torpedo bay. The game indeed builds up on the familiar mechanics, improving many of them and integrating them beautifully into the theme as you step onto the eerie veins grown into the ocean floor and drag your heavy diving boots into visceral and awkward underwater fights with spear guns and knives tearing into air hoses and sick alien flesh, crushing helmets and bones with your tentacles and giant claws. Your tentacles and your giant claws. Oh, haven't I told you? Lovecraft laughs madly in the background as you are deliciously compelled to become one with the ocean. Makes sense. When in sea, do like a seaman. No, scratch that. RPG elements, people, and RPG influences. Get that title card up! Stirring Abyss is a game of timers. Every time you crawl out of the submarine and go on a mission, the air supply gauge in your suit reminds you that it cannot go forever, and madness and death await if you faff about too long. Thankfully, this is manageable, and you can bring additional air tanks and top the air off at specific locations. The corruption timer isn't as forgiving, as it sets the pace for the entire game. It goes up inexorably and slowly as you do missions, rest, and plainly do things wrong. The more corruption, the stronger your enemies, the nastier the ambushes, the oftener you hear the abyss wailing at your mind, urging you to lose it. Corruption is there to stay and usually too hard to get rid of. Your third and final timer is sanity. In addition to the obvious health bar, your characters have a sanity bar, and there are plenty of ways to deplete it, from enemy attacks to using dark special abilities. Whenever it runs out, you don't die, you go psychotic for a turn and then go back to normal. The kicker is that every time you have an episode, you lose your maximum sanity. Once it reaches 0, you go cuckoo beyond salvation. Worse, while it is reasonably easy to learn to manage your health through various precautions and abilities, keeping your sanity up is hard, and there's little you can do as it surreptitiously fades away throughout the game. All this fits perfectly into the Lovecraftian mythos and Lovecraftian mood. Survival, hostile nature, looming darkness, and you rubbing the last working brain cell in your head, hoping to piece the clues together and catch a glimpse of something enormous and ancient. This is also where you can discern the tabletop heritage of Stirring Abyss in the Lovecraft-themed cooperative board games like Arkham Horror, Elder Sign, Seventh Continent, or Eldritch Horror, where you lead an early 20th century team of investigators, clairvoyants, and assorted wackaloons to solve the mystery and try to stop the cosmic evil from taking over before the doom clock runs out. And failing to do that some 80% of the time. Why? Well, bad decisions and worse die rolls. Now, what if I told you that you can actually fail rolling dice in Stirring Abyss? There are occasional skill checks that you might want to pass because who knows what the creepy talking idol is gonna do to you, so you roll the actual dice into an actual dice tray. And hey, you might not advance corruption by my god, how many? The die rolls interact with character abilities and traits, so you can boost your chances and you can actually buy better dice through the Enigma board, which makes this otherwise typical interface for purchasing permanent party abilities rather unique. My only gripe is that you don't get to use them frequently enough, but even in the current form, they add a good pinch of spice into the game. Much of the game's story is told through immersive and thematic diary logs left in various ocean floor outposts by the competing and supposedly failed Soviet expedition. Well, these diaries actually got a System Shock vibe here. Both the games have no dialogue in them, and you discover the events through haunting logs left by dead people, and both the games have RPG-style character and skill development. They keep you on your toes with creepy stuff and can screw you over pretty hard if you fail those skill checks. I also appreciate how reasonably Soviets are depicted in the game's writing, no poorly researched over-the-top silliness that you often see in games, and the names in the logs are what Soviet Navy officers could have actually had. Although, Tretiak, Skrastins, did they pick these names off hockey team rosters? Well, I wouldn't put it past a bunch of Finns. Good idea and great job anyway. It's almost not worth mentioning though that Stirring Abyss has a small magic system consisting of a few spells an oddly benevolent spirit gives you early in the game, which I've found to be tacked on and rather wanting. They're mostly weak, but still gleefully gobble up a valuable action point a pop. They're not even situational, as you're pretty much always better off using character skills, items, or mutations that are a better thematic match to begin with. There's also no exploration, as you're given a full set of spells right off the bat. I feel there's a lot of potential left untapped here. Perhaps certain spells could harm specific kinds of enemies, perhaps they could pack quite a punch, but require you to do often disastrous die rolls, or they could be something you discover, something you gather clues and insights for, something you test and try first. I'm afraid none of this is in the game. However, it goes without saying that I've enjoyed my time with Stirring Abyss, which offers a good 15 hours in story mode, and potentially a good chunk in Endless mode, which is essentially a roguelike set of increasingly difficult missions without a story. The combat and the resource management offer solid tactical and strategic choices, what with the different party skills, character classes, and mutations. Let's face it, snapping that giant lobster claw on the fathom seer is gruesomely gratifying. And Stirring Abyss will not hold a challenge back if you really want it. Even normal difficulty will bite an experienced player in the bum if they get careless. Finally, I really love that the story RPG elements don't shy away from their tabletop inspirations and mesh brilliantly with the theme. If you are hopelessly into Lovecraftian mythos and are ready to spend a few evenings submerging yourself in the game's beautifully hand-drawn and stylish universe, you will adore the experience. And that's my review of Stirring Abyss. This is it. Go get the game, it's great. Or at least go download the demo, which is a very 1998 thing for a game to have, but it actually has like a third of the story, so stop listening to me now and finally go. Grow your own tentacle! But do press subscribe on your way out. I'll be more welcoming later. I promise.